With injuries affecting the fantasy landscape, some running backs have moved up in the depth chart, leaving fantasy managers wondering who to start in their lineups. Thankfully, SI's fantasy analyst Michael Fabiano is here to break down the backs you should start and sit in week 6. Fabs, all right, who are the playmakers fantasy owners want in their lineup this week?
Certainly David Montgomery. Every single week, I look to see who the Panthers are playing, and whoever the running back is, I am going with that back. Montgomery is my start of the week on si.com/fantasy. The matchup is great. You look at the numbers, running backs have averaged over 170 scrimmage yards and around 36 fantasy points per game against Carolina. And Montgomery's been playing more of a featured role since Tariq Cohen has been out on injured reserve. So Montgomery is a very strong RB2 this week in a smash matchup. And then Alexander Madison. If Dalvin Cook is out this week, and I would think he probably would be, because keep in mind, Minnesota has a bye coming up in week 7, so you rest him for a couple of weeks. This is a great spot for Alexander Madison. Atlanta's defense has been awful against running backs. The position has scored 6 total touchdowns, has averaged the 6th most fantasy points against Atlanta. So if you got Madison off the waiver wire, or maybe you grab them as a handcuff for Dalvin Cook, he needs to be in your lineup. Just make sure that Dalvin is not playing this week, but I would project that he'll probably be rested.
All right, start of the week. I like it. Let's talk about who you're not a fan of, though. Damien Harris or Mark Ingram. Why should fantasy owners avoid them?
Mark Ingram has been here like every week. Like every week, sit him running back, it's Mark Ingram because, well, that backfield has become very confusing. Greg Roman, the OC in Baltimore, is basically splitting snaps and touches between J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, and Ingram. And none of these guys is averaging 10 touches a game. That's bad. None of these guys is averaging over 8.2 fantasy points per game. That's bad. So while the matchup isn't horrible on paper, I just don't know who to start out of this backfield on a weekly basis. If you start any of them, it's Ingram, but cross your fingers. I would avoid them if at all possible. And then Damien Harris, before the Patriots had that surprise bye week, he had a very strong game, 17 carries, 100 yards against Kansas City. But he does nothing in the passing game, and he won't do anything as a receiver as well. And this week, he's got the Broncos. Their defense has given up the fewest fantasy points to running back so far this season. They've only given up 1 touchdown to the position. So Damien Harris is someone that, if you have depth in your backfield, I would fade in what is a bad matchup on paper.
Yeah, it's challenging to predict the split in Baltimore's backfield, so staying away from Ingram is good advice as always. Fabs, thank you so much. For more advice and Sports Illustrated's award-winning weekly player rankings, get your membership to SI Fantasy Plus for just $14.99 a month.